The boardroom was silent except for the sharp click of heels against the polished floor. Alina stood at the head of the table, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted the collar of her blouse. Her heart pounded so loudly that it almost drowned out the low murmur of anticipation from the executives seated around her. Across the room Victoria, her boss and tormentor, sat with an air of smug superiority, her lips curled into a barely concealed smirk. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Just 2 weeks ago, Alina had been on top of the world. She'd spent months pouring her soul into developing a groundbreaking marketing strategy for one of their biggest clients, a campaign that promised not only to revolutionize how they approached digital engagement but also secure millions in revenue for the company. It was bold, innovative, and undeniably brilliant. And yet here she was, standing before the board, fighting to hold back tears while Victoria took credit for every single idea Alina had painstakingly crafted. The betrayal cut deep, not just because Victoria had stolen her work, but because she'd orchestrated everything so perfectly. The sabotage started subtly. Critical emails accidentally delayed, key meetings rescheduled without notice, even whispers planted among colleagues about Alina being too inexperienced to handle such a high-stakes project. Then came the final blow, Victoria presenting Alina's presentation as her own during a preliminary review with senior management. By the time Alina realized what was happening, it was too late. Victoria had already positioned herself as the mastermind behind the campaign, leaving Alina scrambling to prove otherwise. But proving anything wasn't easy when your opponent held all the cards, and knew exactly how to play them. Alina clenched her fists under the table, forcing herself to breathe steadily. She couldn't afford to crack now, not in front of these people who saw her as nothing more than Victoria's subordinate. If there was one thing Alina hated, it was feeling powerless. Growing up in a small town where opportunities were scarce, she'd learned early on that success didn't come easily. You had to fight for it tooth and nail. That relentless determination had brought her here, to a prestigious corporate job in the city, working alongside some of the brightest minds in the industry. But none of that mattered if she let someone like Victoria crush her spirit. As the CEO began speaking, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife, Alina forced herself to focus. This meeting wasn't just about securing approval for the campaign, it was about survival. For weeks, she'd been plotting her next move, biding her time until she could strike back. Today would be the day she turned the tables, or at least, that was the plan. Victoria leaned forward in her chair, her perfectly manicured nails tapping rhythmically against the edge of the conference table. "Thank you for taking the time to review my proposal," she said smoothly, her tone dripping with confidence. "I truly believe this campaign will set a new standard for our client relations moving forward." Alina's jaw tightened. My proposal. Not ours. Not the team's. Hers. The audacity of it made her blood boil, but she kept her expression neutral, nodding along as though she agreed. Inside, however, her mind raced. She'd anticipated this moment for days, rehearsing every possible scenario in her head. Now, as Victoria continued to speak, outlining points that Alina had spent countless sleepless nights refining, she felt a flicker of resolve ignite within her. She glanced around the room, studying the faces of the board members. Some looked impressed by Victoria's eloquence, others bored, but none seemed to suspect that the woman sitting beside Alina was anything less than genuine. That was Victoria's greatest strength, her ability to charm and manipulate those around her. To most, she appeared capable, confident, and above reproach. But Alina knew better. Beneath the polished exterior lay a calculating predator, always watching, always waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. And today, Alina intended to make sure Victoria stumbled. "Before we proceed," the CEO interrupted, gesturing toward Alina, "I'd like to hear Assistant Manager Patel's thoughts on the implementation phase. After all, she's been instrumental in executing many of the logistical details." A flicker of annoyance crossed Victoria's face, but she quickly masked it with a practiced smile. "Of course," she said, turning to Alina with feigned enthusiasm. "Alina, why don't you share your insights?" Alina rose to her feet, her movements deliberate and measured. She could feel Victoria's eyes boring into her, daring her to say something incriminating. Instead, she offered a polite smile and began speaking, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Thank you, Victoria, for the opportunity to contribute to such an impactful initiative." The words tasted bitter, but she delivered them flawlessly. "While I agree with much of what's been presented, I'd like to highlight a few additional considerations that might enhance the overall effectiveness of the campaign." For the next several minutes, Alina spoke with precision, weaving in subtle references to ideas she'd originally pitched. She avoided outright accusations, knowing that direct confrontation would only undermine her credibility. Instead, she framed her contributions as collaborative efforts, carefully planting seeds of doubt in the minds of the board members. As she talked, she noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Several executives exchanged glances, their expressions thoughtful rather than dismissive. Even the CEO nodded approvingly, jotting down notes on his tablet. When she finished, there was a brief pause before applause broke out. Alina allowed herself a small, inward smile. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was progress. Victoria, however, wasn't pleased. Her mask of composure slipped ever so slightly, revealing a flash of irritation. "Excellent points, Alina," she said through gritted teeth, her tone laced with thinly veiled condescension. "Clearly your attention to detail is unmatched." "Thank you," Alina replied coolly, meeting Victoria's gaze head-on. "I've always believed that collaboration leads to the best results." The underlying message wasn't lost on Victoria, whose grip on her pen tightened imperceptibly. For the first time since the ordeal began, Alina felt a sense of empowerment. She hadn't let Victoria's manipulation break her. If anything, it had made her stronger. But this was far from over. As the meeting progressed, the discussion grew increasingly heated. Questions flew back and forth, each executive eager to weigh in on the campaign's potential impact. Alina remained attentive, interjecting strategically whenever Victoria attempted to gloss over inconsistencies or exaggerate outcomes. With every correction, every clarification, Alina chipped away at Victoria's facade, exposing cracks in her armor. Still, Victoria refused to back down. She countered Alina's arguments with sharp retorts, her confidence unwavering. It was clear she wouldn't go down without a fight. And perhaps that was exactly what Alina needed, a chance to push her adversary to the brink. Finally, the CEO called for a short recess, giving everyone a chance to regroup before reconvening for the final vote. As the board members filed out of the room, chatting animatedly amongst themselves, Alina lingered behind, gathering her notes. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Victoria approach, her heels clicking ominously against the floor. "You're playing a dangerous game," Victoria hissed, her voice low enough to avoid prying ears. "Don't think I don't see what you're doing." Alina turned to face her, her expression calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'm not doing anything unusual," she replied evenly. "Just ensuring the campaign succeeds. Isn't that what we both want?" Victoria's eyes narrowed, her lips curving into a humorless smile. "Careful, Alina. You wouldn't want to bite the hand that feeds you." "I prefer to feed myself," Alina shot back, her tone icy. "And maybe it's time you stop trying to take credit for other people's work." For a moment, neither woman moved. The tension between them was palpable, a silent battle of wills waged in the shadow of the empty boardroom. Then, with a curt nod, Victoria turned on her heel and strode out of the room, leaving Alina alone with her thoughts. As the door clicked shut behind her, Alina exhaled slowly, allowing herself a brief moment of vulnerability. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the table, steadying herself. This was no longer just about revenge or vindication, it was about reclaiming her dignity, proving to herself that she was more than the sum of Victoria's manipulations. The clock ticked steadily toward the resumption of the meeting, each second stretching longer than the last. Alina straightened her posture, smoothing her skirt as she prepared to rejoin the fray. Whatever happened next, she vowed to stay true to herself, to fight with integrity, even if it meant losing. Because sometimes, the greatest victories weren't measured in promotions or accolades, but in the courage to stand up for what was right. And Alina had plenty of courage left to give. When the board members reconvened, the energy in the room had shifted. The casual chatter that filled the recess was replaced by a charged silence as everyone took their seats. The CEO cleared his throat and began summarizing the key points discussed so far, his tone measured but firm. Alina watched him closely, her mind racing to anticipate how this would all unfold. She knew the final vote wasn't just about approving the campaign, it was about trust, credibility, and who could deliver results under pressure. Victoria sat across from her, radiating an aura of forced calm. Her earlier irritation seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a renewed determination to regain control of the narrative. As the CEO opened the floor for closing remarks, Victoria didn't hesitate. She stood up gracefully, smoothing her blazer with practiced ease before addressing the room. "I'd like to take a moment to emphasize the importance of leadership in driving innovation," she began, her voice steady and commanding. "This campaign is not just about numbers or strategies, it's about vision. And I believe my experience and guidance have been instrumental in bringing us to this pivotal moment." Alina felt her stomach churn at the blatant self-promotion, but she kept her expression neutral. Victoria's words were calculated, designed to reinforce her image as the indispensable leader while subtly undermining anyone else's contributions. But Alina noticed something else, a flicker of unease in Victoria's eyes, barely perceptible but enough to confirm what she already suspected. Victoria was worried. The realization gave Alina a surge of confidence. She leaned forward slightly in her chair, her posture attentive yet relaxed. When Victoria finished speaking and sat down, the CEO turned to Alina. "Would you care to add anything before we move to the vote?" he asked, his tone polite but probing. Alina rose slowly, her movements deliberate. She glanced around the room, meeting each executive's gaze briefly before speaking. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and composed. "I'd like to echo Victoria's sentiments about the importance of vision, but I also want to emphasize the value of collaboration. No great idea exists in a vacuum. This campaign is the result of countless hours of teamwork, creativity, and problem-solving from everyone involved." Her statement drew murmurs of agreement from several board members. Encouraged, Alina pressed on. "For instance, the social media segmentation strategy included in the proposal originated from insights gathered during our focus group sessions. It was a collective effort, one that required input from multiple departments." She paused, letting the implication sink in. "While it's tempting to attribute success to a single individual, I think it's crucial we recognize the broader contributions that made this possible." Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her smile now strained. Alina could see her mentally scrambling to counter the subtle challenge, but there was no easy way to refute what she'd said without appearing defensive, or worse, dishonest. To Alina's surprise, one of the senior executives chimed in. "That's an excellent point," he said, nodding thoughtfully. "Collaboration often gets overlooked in favor of highlighting individual achievements. Perhaps we should consider ways to better acknowledge team efforts moving forward." The comment seemed innocuous enough, but Alina recognized it for what it was, a crack in Victoria's carefully constructed facade. For someone who thrived on taking sole credit, any suggestion of shared recognition posed a threat to her authority. And judging by the tightening of Victoria's jaw, she felt it too. As the discussion continued, Alina found herself gaining ground. She answered questions confidently, providing detailed explanations that showcased both her expertise and her commitment to the project. Whenever Victoria tried to interject with grandiose statements, Alina deftly redirected the conversation back to concrete examples and data-driven insights. By the time the CEO called for the final vote, the atmosphere in the room had shifted palpably. But Alina wasn't naive enough to think the battle was won. Even if the board approved the campaign, and even if they acknowledged her role in its development, she knew Victoria wouldn't go down quietly. This woman thrived on power plays, and losing this round would only fuel her desire for retaliation. When the votes were tallied, the CEO announced the decision: the campaign would proceed, with additional oversight to ensure its successful implementation. He specifically praised Alina for her meticulous planning and dedication to detail, much to Victoria's visible displeasure. However, true to form, Victoria managed to salvage a shred of dignity by insisting she'd oversee the execution personally. As the meeting adjourned, Alina packed up her materials, her hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline rush. She hadn't expected such a public acknowledgement of her work, and while it wasn't the outright vindication she'd dreamed of, it was a start. More importantly, she'd planted seeds of doubt in the minds of the board members, doubts that could grow into cracks in Victoria's dominance over time. Just as Alina reached the door, Victoria appeared beside her, her presence looming like a shadow. "Don't think this changes anything," she whispered, her voice low and venomous. "You may have won today, but don't mistake temporary praise for long-term success." Alina met her gaze squarely, refusing to flinch. "I'm not trying to win against you, Victoria. I'm trying to do my job, to contribute to this company in meaningful ways. If that threatens you, maybe it's time to reconsider your priorities." Victoria's lips thinned into a tight line, and for a moment, Alina thought she might lash out. Instead, she stepped aside, allowing Alina to leave first. As Alina walked down the hallway, she couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious triumph. She'd faced her greatest adversary head-on and emerged stronger, not unscathed, but resilient. Yet deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. Victoria was a force to be reckoned with, and her ego wouldn't allow her to let this go unanswered. Whatever came next, Alina resolved to stay vigilant. She'd learned the hard way that survival in this world meant being prepared for anything. And so, as she returned to her desk and began drafting follow-up emails for the campaign, Alina allowed herself a small private smile. The game was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like she had a fighting chance. Weeks turned into months, and the campaign launched with resounding success. The client was thrilled, praising the innovative approach and seamless execution. Revenue projections soared, and the company celebrated its biggest win in years. For Alina, it was validation, not just of her skills, but of her resilience. She had weathered betrayal, sabotage, and countless sleepless nights to see her vision come to life. The boardroom dynamics began to shift subtly after that fateful meeting. While Victoria still held her position as department head, her influence waned. The cracks Alina had exposed and her credibility continued to widen, especially when other team members started speaking up about similar patterns of behavior they'd witnessed over the years. Whispers of favoritism, credit stealing, and manipulation reached senior management's ears, prompting an internal review. Alina kept her focus on her work, determined not to let bitterness consume her. She poured her energy into mentoring junior staff, fostering a culture of collaboration and mutual support within her team. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Colleagues who had once dismissed her as just another assistant manager now sought her advice and guidance. Even some of the executives began consulting her directly for input on new projects. One day, as she walked into the office, she was summoned to the CEO's office, a summons that made her heart race. Was this another test? Another challenge? But when she entered, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. The CEO greeted her with a rare smile, gesturing for her to sit. "Alina," he began, leaning back in his chair, "I wanted to personally commend you for your outstanding performance over the past few months. Your leadership during the campaign rollout has been nothing short of exceptional." She nodded, unsure where this was heading. "Thank you, sir. I'm grateful for the opportunity to contribute." He chuckled softly. "Gratitude is one thing, but talent is another. And yours hasn't gone unnoticed." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "As you may know, we've been conducting reviews at various levels of management. Unfortunately," he hesitated briefly, "Victoria's conduct has raised serious concerns. After much deliberation, we've decided to restructure the department." Alina's breath caught. Restructuring could mean anything, but the look in the CEO's eyes told her everything she needed to know. "Effective immediately," he continued, "you'll be stepping into the role of department head. We believe your vision, integrity, and ability to inspire those around you make you the ideal candidate to lead this team forward." For a moment, Alina couldn't speak. Her mind raced, replaying every late night, every tear shed in frustration, every time she'd questioned whether standing up for herself was worth it. Now, sitting across from the CEO, hearing those words, she knew it had all been worth it. I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you for trusting me with this responsibility." The CEO smiled warmly. "You've earned it, Alina. More importantly, you've shown us what true leadership looks like. You'll have our full support as you transition into this role." When she left the office, she felt lighter than she had in years. It wasn't just the promotion, it was the vindication, the recognition that doing the right thing mattered. As news spread through the company, colleagues stopped by her desk to congratulate her, their faces filled with genuine admiration. Even those who had doubted her before seemed eager to rally behind her. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came later that afternoon, when Victoria approached her outside the break room. Gone was the smug confidence, replaced by a guarded humility. "Congratulations," Victoria said stiffly, avoiding eye contact. "You played your cards well." Alina studied her for a long moment, then offered a small, genuine smile. "It wasn't about playing games, Victoria. It was about proving that hard work and integrity can still win in this world. Maybe someday, you'll understand that." Victoria didn't respond, turning away with a mixture of frustration and resignation. Watching her walk off, Alina felt no anger, only relief. She hadn't set out to destroy Victoria, she'd simply fought for justice and fairness. That victory was sweeter than any revenge could ever be. In the weeks that followed, Alina took charge of her new role with grace and determination. She implemented changes to foster transparency and inclusivity, ensuring that everyone's contributions were recognized and valued. Under her leadership, the department flourished, earning accolades both internally and externally. And though challenges inevitably arose, Alina faced them with the same courage and resilience that had carried her through her darkest days. She learned to trust herself, to embrace her strengths, and to surround herself with people who believed in her. One evening, as she packed up her things to leave the office, she paused to look out the window at the city skyline. The lights twinkled like stars, reflecting the endless possibilities ahead. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace, with herself, with her journey, and with the future. As she stepped into the elevator, ready to face whatever came next, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." And for the first time, she truly believed it.